Today we will be doing our Michaelmas Batik banners. The first thing you will need is a piece of fabric that is about 14 by 15 inches. That's what mine is. Something that's almost square. That way you'll have the same proportions as mine. So you'll need a piece of fabric. If you would like to do two, you can do both of our patterns today. We have two designs to show you. You will also need a pencil, and that is to get the details of your drawing onto your fabric. Then you will need a school glue that is washable. A gel glue is fine, but it needs to be washable. You will also need a jar of water. You will also need your paints. You may have watercolor paints or in jars, or you'll have the dry paint. That's fine too. You will also need a paintbrush. You may be able to find hopefully a couple of sizes so that you can get into all the corners with the colors that you hope for in your design. Today we have a star and sun. And we also have Michael taming the dragon. Or St. George taming the dragon. You can see that pattern? And those are the two that you can choose from today. We are going to start with the dragon batik, starting with the ground, the grass, where St. Michael and the dragon will be standing. Then we'll get our proportions and find the head of the figure, drawing neck and arm raised, reaching out to the dragon's head, not being afraid and being courageous. Now we need to do the halo or the circle around St. Michael, and it's time for glue. Now you can see a little bit better the pattern, shape. If there's any holes in the glue after you're finished, you can go back and just dab some more on. You can also use a toothpick and blend the two together and kind of scraping down into the fabric so the glue reaches into the fabric. Don't worry about any globs, larger globs. You can try to pick them out with the toothpick, but it won't hurt your end result. Lots of fine-tuning little things after your glue project is done. Don't forget the sunset around Michael. And you could have also put in the sword, the glue with the sword, or just paint in the sword later. All right, now it is time to touch up with the toothpick and let it dry. The next project is the sun stars. Started with the glue right away so you could see the pattern. Basically it's a circle in the corner with a moon shape and inside with a star at the very corner of the fabric. These stars could be larger, easier to take off the glue later. Touch up with toothpick and let it dry. We are going to start with the sun and stars painting, and we'll go back to the dragon after this. So I started with the darkest blue. We call it the Prussian. It almost looks like the ocean. It's a little green tint. Some of you only have ultramarine blue, whatever blue you have. Start with the darkest blue, thick as you can get. Go to the bottom of your jar and scoop out that dark color and start on the edges. And then as you go in, you use water. to make it lighter and lighter. All the way around with the darkest blue, and only in the spaces between the ribbons of light from the sun. You will need a smaller brush to get right next to the glue so you don't go over the line into your next color space, the glue line. And I made some mistakes, so I had a paper towel ready to soak up those droplets. And then I moved the water closer. And it's always good to hold your paints, if you can, in your hand to avoid spilling them. And if your kitties are nearby, you don't want them to knock them over. Small brush is really helpful here. And the water helps to bring down the color. I changed my color of blue to see what would happen, but you could stick with the same color. If you are using watercolor, you can use a Prussian. If you're using acrylic, that's good too. It doesn't run as much later when you are painting or washing off the color to get off the glue. So either kind of paint. And now the darkest of the other spectrum. So you want to blend these colors eventually, but you would like to have the dark opposite end painted first, and then you're going to be ready to go towards the next color. I have a few brushes that I can continue working detail and blending and grabbing new color without making my paint jars different colors. You don't want to mix them inside of the paint jar. If you haven't painted yet with your paints, make sure you don't dip in a different color. Wash your brush in between. Now I have a blending brush. This project took me around an hour. It might be that way for you, maybe less. You don't have to be as complicated as I have been with the blending or with the different colors. It might go quicker for you. Now we're making some details around the stars. Now I switched colors to the gold. And if you only have yellow, start with yellow and then add your red. I should have probably done all the red first, but we create how we create. A couple of splatters with the water. You can see by my water jar there is a spot where I dropped water, but I immediately went over and dabbed it with my paper towel. And later I will fill it back in with blue. So I did the red, and then I did on the far side of the streams the yellow, and then blended them afterwards. Making sure not to dip any other color into my yellow or my red. Now I'm steering clear of my star by using water to just let it blend. Drop that water. The colors will bleed together on their own when there's droplets of water. I repaired my hole in the blue. Now that the blue is a bit drier, it's safer to do the stars. And I don't even go to the edges quite so much with the star, just to avoid making them green. And that is it. Now let that dry completely. We will start on the Dragon Batik next. Start with the darkest blue. I went over the line, so I had to get my paper towel out again. Over the glue line. I really want to make that dark. That dragon is very dark. The grass is not going to be as dark, so I didn't need to use it full strength. And then the figure there is also quite dark, so we wanted to make sure it is with the bottom paint that has settled in your jar. I used a fine brush for these edges so that I could really get a crisp silhouette shadow of this dragon. And I'm carrying my blue in my hand so that I can control where it might drip and keep the rest of my picture free from turning green. Now the figure. And the grass, and I added yellow with a different brush. Here I wanted to drop in the yellow so I didn't have to dip my brush in again. So I dropped. You can see it spreading a bit as I'm now blending, but it was dropped in. Yellow was dropped in. Green is my favorite color. Okay, now we're on to the sky. And again, opposite sides for this kind of painting to really get a good mix in the middle. And this fabric is needing to be moistened with water, but it's a balance between getting a strong dark color and blending it nicely. The thicker glue was a good mistake here with the dragon edges and the wings. Not exactly a mistake, but it was a good thing. Now for the sun shining behind St. Michael with a strong yellow and being careful not to get the blue mixed in. And now this fiery orange, which is kind of, nearer to the dragon, representing the fire of the breath. And then I used vermilion. If you have it, you can use that for the orange, darker orange or red. And I wanted to blend a little bit better in the sky. And I used some golden. This is an option as well. Bringing some sun rays in. And we are finished, letting that dry completely. Now it would be time to rinse your fabric, if you choose to do so. You could also leave it the way it is. But if you would like that lighter batik look and you're ready to scrape off some glue, then give it a rinse for no more than 2 to 3 minutes or a little less so that the glue doesn't completely get too soft. You might be able to pick it off. You could also use a bowl and pick it off if it's not too soaking wet. So it's kind of a balance of how wet the glue is and how wet the fabric is. But sometimes it'll pull right off. Remember that this paint does stain, so be careful where you are dripping paint. This seems to be taking a little bit of time. So I found another way. This seemed to be really efficient. Getting a butter knife with not too sharp of edges on the tip so that it doesn't tear your fabric. My fabric is a muslin, so it was pretty tough. and it wasn't going to break with a butter knife. And I just scraped off all of the glue. Using some tension is better, and then I had to be careful. My fingers were touching the blue and then going into the yellow. So my fingers had to be placed just so. I'm scraping off the blue from the star, and it does make it a more subtle effect in the end to rinse. And then this is a shot of where I rinsed it a little bit more before I went back to take off the glue. So it didn't leak as much. And there is the wet finished batik. That will need to dry also completely. If you feel like your paint has washed away too much, you can surely go back and paint your fabric a little bit more. And I added my sword to the ground near my gael. That is another thing you can do. And that is the end of our Michaelmas Batik project. Have fun with this, and to finish the projects, you can sew a seam around the edges. You can also glue a dowel to the top and tie a string to hang up your beautiful batik Michaelmas flags. Happy Michaelmas! Enjoy!